I want to welcome you to Canyon Creek Church today. For all of you that don't know who I am, I'm Pastor Brandon. I'm the lead pastor of the church. It's one of my favorite weeks when all of us get to hear the exact same message. And so we know that across all of our campuses, we are hearing the exact same thing and we're all on the same page. It's exciting. And we have the last message in our Born for This series today. And you just watched a video. And that video is known as one of the most inspiring moments in Olympic history. And there is one newspaper article about John Akwandi that says he is the champion who finished dead last. So he literally lost the race. In fact, he came in an hour and a half after the person that won, yet it's one of the most inspiring moments in Olympic history. What happened was he is from Tanzania, and all the hopes of Tanzania rested on him. In fact, he was supposed to win the gold medal. He went there to represent his country. He loves his country, and in the middle of running, he tripped, tore up his leg, and he dislocated his knee. But for whatever reason, he picked himself up, and in spite of all the pain, he kept running, and he finished the race. And he has been quoted multiple times over the years on why he did this. And he made this incredible statement. He said, "My country didn't send me 5,000 miles to start a race. They sent me 5,000 miles to finish the race." Whenever I hear that quote, I'm reminded of what Paul said in 1 Timothy. Paul was giving Timothy some advice, and Timothy was someone that he had mentored, someone that he had coached. He loved Timothy. They weren't like blood relatives, but it was as if Timothy was his son. And so if you have a moment to inspire your son before your son is going to go out and do something great, in our world right now, I have two sons, and they are both about to graduate from high school and are both about to step out into the season where they really pursue their dreams. And I can imagine myself giving my boys this same type of advice. But in 1 Timothy 4:12, Paul said, "Timothy, let no one despise you for your youth, but you set an example to the believers." And he gave them 5 categories. He said, in your speech, in your conduct, in your love, in your faith, and in your purity. Basically, Paul tells his spiritual son, Timothy, what matters most in your life is your integrity. You need to be a man of integrity. And then he says, Timothy, I want you to start being a man of integrity while you're young, and then spend all of the days of your life living that way. So start young and never quit. And I will tell you something, that Paul is an amazing example in Scripture of someone who, once he finally got started, he not only started well, but he finished even better. Now, the world is full of people who start off really well. But as they get going, the difficulties of life, the challenges of life, the hardships of life, the reality of what they've stepped into gets too much for them, and they quit. The world is full of people who start well out of the blocks, but never quite finish the race. I think many people today, they don't finish the race because when they get hurt, they quit. Now, I'm not saying literally hurt like what happened to John Akwari, but they get like emotionally hurt, or they get spiritually hurt, and they just kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater, if you understand the analogy. They just give up and quit. Sometimes they quit because they get distracted. Sometimes people quit because it's too challenging. Sometimes people quit because it's harder than they imagined and it took longer than they imagined. I want to read you something in Acts chapter 9, and this basically describes how Paul started. So I've shared with you over the last several months Paul's salvation experience. So we're aware that he gets radically converted. So Paul starts this way. Acts chapter 9, verse 20. And I want you to underline two words, and I'll point them out. He said, and immediately, if you have a Bible, I want you to underline that word immediately. So right away, Paul started. If you're taking notes, write down the word immediately. He said, and immediately he proclaimed Jesus in the synagogue. So immediately, Paul started preaching, saying, he is the Son of God. And all who heard him were amazed and said, is this not the man who made havoc in Jerusalem of those who called upon his name? So it says, he immediately went out and proclaimed. And then it goes on and says, and has he not come here for this purpose, to bring them bound before the chief priest? So they said, isn't Paul the bad guy? And now he's talking about Jesus. And then it says this, verse 22, it says, but Saul increased, underline that word increased, write it down. So write down the word immediately and the word increased. So Saul increased all the more in strength and confounded the Jews who were living in Damascus. So basically, Paul starts immediately, and he starts having success immediately because there's an increase. So Paul starts well. And the thing I love about Paul is that he finished even better. So he later on in his second letter to Timothy, it's later on in Paul's life, in 2 Timothy 4:7, Paul says, Timothy, I have fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I have kept the faith. I like to tell people that literally what Paul is saying there is Paul is saying, I didn't quit. I mean, you knew all the hardships that I faced. In fact, multiple times, Paul lists all of these terrible things that have happened to him. And in the end, he said, I kept serving Jesus. I kept loving people. I kept doing ministry. And even though everything got hard and people turned against me and I got bit by a snake and shipwrecked and imprisoned and, I got stoned, in spite of all of these things, I finished the race. Church, that is our goal, that we live lives of integrity, that we start well, and we finish better. We're in the middle of this, born for this series, and the last thing I want you to learn is that you are born to live a life of integrity, a life that honors God in every single aspect, that someone like Paul is an example to you and I, someone who started well and finished better. Let's look at the contrast, because in the Old Testament, there's a king who was the most privileged of all the kings, Solomon. He had everything. He had wealth, he had knowledge, he had power, influence, he had everything that you could imagine having to be successful in life. And Solomon started well. 1 Kings 3:3 tells us that Solomon, so when he started as king, he loved the Lord, he walked in the statutes of David his father, and only he sacrificed and made offerings in the high places. So Solomon starts well. He loved the Lord, he served God, he honored the traditions passed down by his father David, but Solomon didn't finish well. In 1 Kings 11:4, it said, for when Solomon was old, his wives, so notice plural, wives, so we know that Solomon, between his wives and his concubine, had over 1,000 women that he was interacting with. 1,000 wives. And it says, for when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David, his father. So Solomon is that other example. So Paul started well and he finished better. Solomon started really well, but he finished poorly. This is a terrible ending. Can I tell you, leaders, people will forget how you started someday. If you are out there, you are a business owner, you're leading a ministry in the church, you lead a nonprofit, you consider yourself a leader in an organization or in a ministry, people forget how you started. How you started in the end is what is irrelevant, but people will never forget how you finished. How you end is how you will always be remembered. And I'll tell you, that isn't necessarily fair. Man, there are many, many, many great leaders in America, Christian leaders, that had phenomenal ministries for 20 years, and then the last 5 years, they made some mistakes and blew up. But the problem is, they're only remembered for the end. And Paul said, I have finished the race. I've kept the faith. You see, our goal is that we be men and women of integrity, that we start well and we finish better. And I will tell you, church, that your ultimate legacy is your integrity. That when it comes to our reputation and it comes to our life, integrity is everything. And in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to answer 3 questions about integrity. I want to answer, what exactly is integrity? How can you and I, what do we need to be aware of? Because how can we lose our integrity? And what do we do to maintain our integrity and make sure that we finish well? So the first question is literally, what is integrity? What does it mean to be a man of integrity or a woman of integrity, a leader with integrity, a person of integrity? It means that you are consistently you all of the time, that there is no difference between your private life and your public life. I've heard it said that integrity is who you are when you are alone in the dark. Integrity is being consistent in your mind and in your heart and in your actions. You see, there's really 3 key elements, 3 parts to integrity. There is the part that says what I am. Like, what I am is integrity, that I am a whole person, that I am complete, I am consistent, that everything I do and everything I say is consistent with God's nature. They said this about Jesus in Mark 12:14. It said, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity, that you aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance to the truth." So they're basically saying, Jesus, we know that you're consistent. We know that you are a man of integrity because you're not swayed by the crowd. You don't change your message based upon this person or that person. You are consistently you all the time. You see, integrity is this understanding that this is who I am. I am whole and complete. John MacArthur, I don't always agree with all of his theology, but I love this statement that he made. He said, integrity is the quality or condition of being whole or undivided. Completeness. He said integrity comes from the word integer, which means whole or complete. And then he emphasizes that integrity is the polar opposite of hypocrisy. So, 3 elements of integrity. It's the what I am. And then another element of integrity is what I stand on. That in other words, I do what I say I will do. I am trustworthy. I'm honest. There is a commitment to the promises that I make. I'm faithful to the words that I speak. That if you're a person of integrity, you honor the promises that you make. Jesus said it this way. Matthew 5:37, he said, "Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." Doesn't it drive you nuts when people just won't tell you the truth? they try to like beat around the bush because they're trying to tell you what they think you want to hear, or they're trying to like let you down easy. But in the end, you just want to know, dude, yes or no? What do you want? Like, yes or no? And then in addition to that, I want to be somebody, I want to hold people at their word. When people tell me things, I want to be able to trust them. I want to know that that they love me to my face, that they're going to love me behind my back. I want there to be consistency. And I will tell you, people that are not consistent, be afraid of them. Because there's a principle that I learned a long time ago that says that those who gossip to you will gossip about you. Meaning that if someone is to my face saying, Pastor Brandon, I love you, and then pulling you aside and saying, Pastor Brandon, he's such a tool, he's such a jerk, you need to be aware that that person's probably doing that to you too. That is a lack of integrity, because that person, you cannot trust what they stand on. You want someone who is honorable and trustworthy. That a person of integrity, their word is their bond. Their life aligns with their words. Bill McCartney, who is the former coach of the Colorado Buffalo football team, is also one of the founders of Promise Keepers, had a great statement about integrity. He said, integrity in its simple form is keeping promises. Isn't that good? And then he goes on and he said, the person of integrity is the one who, when he or she says something, they can be trusted. When he or she gives their word, you can count on it. And that's part of integrity. Integrity is, this is what I am. This is what I stand on. And finally, integrity is, this is what I do. That my actions are consistent with my promises. That what I say and my actions align perfectly together. Church, it is so important that our actions be consistent with God's command for integrity. We live in a world where everything you do can be documented by someone. Man, there's someone somewhere with a smartphone to record you. There's someone somewhere with a picture that they can post on social media. And if you say one thing and get caught doing another thing, you not only represent Jesus poorly, but you show evidence that you are someone who doesn't have integrity. Jesus said this. He said, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father that is in heaven. So basically, Jesus is saying, there's people that will go to church. They will pray prayers the right way. They will worship the right way, but they are far from me. They do not know me. They act one way here, they act another way here, that there is no integrity in the way they live their life. And integrity is, there is consistency with your words and with your deeds. James said it this way. He said, don't just be doer. He said, be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourself. Many of you that are around my age, we grew up in the time and day and age where people, leaders in our life, would constantly say things like, do what I say, not necessarily as I do. So some of you, your parents will say, don't smoke, don't drink, as they're like got a cigarette in their mouth and a beer in their hand. And they're telling you not to drink and smoke. And there's this lack of consistency. But I'll tell you, that attitude doesn't work today. If you share something with your kids, you ask your kids to do something, you better be doing it. If you're a boss, you ask your staff to be doing something, you better be doing it. There has to be consistency with what you say and what you do. In the era of social media, people that say one thing and do another thing, the Bible says, be sure your sins will be shouted in the streets. And what we are learning, especially over the last 12 months, that things that people did that didn't align with who they said they were, that didn't align with their teaching, like these areas where there was lack of integrity, these things that they did 10, 15, 20 years ago are being brought up publicly right now. So you need to be a man or woman of integrity. And integrity is this sense of completeness, that I honor God completely with the way I live my life, what I say, what I do, who I am. I am a person of integrity. Paul's advice to Timothy is, Timothy, that's where you start. Set an example to the believers in faith, in life, in love, in speech, and in purity. You be a person of integrity. Then, years later, he comes back and he said, Timothy, it was so hard, but I did it. I finished the race. I kept the faith. And really, that is our goal, that we be people that can say that. But it is so easy to lose your integrity. It takes your life to build it, and it takes a couple terrible decisions to lose it. So how do people lose their integrity quickly? Robert Clinton said that 70% of all leaders do not finish well. There's some leaders that you and I know that are, like, they've been struggling for years, but we keep remembering them back in their heyday. Can I be bold and say who they are right now? This is who they are. Like, this is who they are. Like, we're still holding on to 10 years ago when this person impacted my life, but this person, who they are right now, this is who they are. That it's my responsibility as your pastor 10 years from now that I'll be the same person. One of the things that you will always know about me, love me or I drive you nuts, I am the same. Like, I'm the same guy I was 10 years ago. I'm the same person I was 10 years before that. I am faithful to Jesus. I love my wife. I love bragging on my kids. People, like the people that are in my world, I am fiercely loyal to. You will always know that, hey, Brandon, this is, he loves Jesus. He's got these high standards for his life, and this is who you just pretty much know that I'll be the same. I can guarantee you 10 years from now, what will I be doing? I will be loving Jesus, loving my wife, loving my kids, and my grandkids. 10 years after that, loving Jesus, my wife, my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids. I mean, that you can just pretty much guarantee that with me, that I am the same, that there is this sense that you kind of know what to expect. So these people that in the past that might have been a huge blessing to you, you don't diminish their impact in your life, but later on, if they didn't finish well, I mean, this is who they are. The question is, how do they lose their way? How do we lose our integrity? Well, I'll tell you, it happens one step at a time. Somebody doesn't just fall into habitual sin. You don't just trip into it. It's usually one poor decision after another. It's usually, I did something, I got away with it, and I said something, didn't have to follow through with it one time, and nobody held me to it, and it happens one step at a time. It is literally the culmination of a lot of questionable decisions and steps, to the point where one day you wake up, look around, and wonder, how the heck did I end up here? How did I get here? And it's usually an abuse of one of the big four. The Bible talks about the big four in 1 John 2:15. John said, "Do not love the world or the things in the world." He said, "If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life, is not from the Father, but from the world." So what are the big four? Simply, they're money, sex, power, and pride. So most people, those are the things that trip them up. Money trips people up. Now, I've said many times that money is not inherently evil. Money can be an incredible blessing, but money can also be an incredible source of temptation. Paul said this in his advice to Timothy. He warned him. He said, "Timothy, the love of money," so money is not evil. He said, "The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil." And he said, "It is through this craving that many have wandered away from the faith." So Not money itself, but their love and obsession and chasing after money drew them away from Jesus. He later on in 2 Timothy 3:2, he talks about beware of lovers of money. You see, God has this clear answer to this temptation. So if you find yourself and money is a challenge, here's his answer. Jesus said it, Matthew 6:33. He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Instead of chasing after money, seek Jesus. Instead of chasing after stuff, seek Jesus. Whenever there is a hint of greed or a hint of stinginess or some love of money, or I would even say a hint of tightwadness, whenever any of those things come, here's how you cure it. You give. You give to missions. You make sure that you are tithing. You give to a bathroom in Everett, or you give to a building fund in Mill Creek. You help people over Thanksgiving, and you buy toys for a toy drive. And how do you cure the love of money or money taking root in your life? You cure it by living a generous life. So you got the issue of money. Other people, they have the issue with sex. Now, I will tell you, as a happily married man, sex is an amazing gift to be enjoyed in marriage. Outside of the confines of marriage, for any other situation than God's intent, it can result in disaster. Solomon himself wrote most of the Proverbs, which is the irony of Solomon. This incredibly wise man couldn't live according to the advice he gave other people. And Solomon in Proverbs 2:18, he's talking about an adulterous person, and he says, surely her house leads down to death, that adultery leads to death. And then Paul said this. He said, but among you there can't be a hint of sexual immorality. There's nothing that will destroy your reputation or your integrity more than an affair, than sexual impurity, than sexual immorality. But God has a clear answer to this temptation. And, if you're a guy or you're a girl, it's not like this one's easy. This is one that you and I have to make a daily decision to guard our hearts and protect ourselves. So the temptation for this is real. But God gave us a clear answer to that temptation, and it is his grace. So whenever the temptation is extreme, you hold on to verses like Hebrews 4:16. And Hebrews says, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So when I'm struggling in this area, what does the Bible say? It says, go to Jesus. Go to the throne of grace. Say, Lord, I'm weak. Make me strong. Lord, help me. I'm distracted. I'm looking twice when I shouldn't. Will you help me? And you constantly go to Jesus for grace. But many people get tripped up because of sex and adultery and pornography and everything that's tied up and wrapped into God's not purpose for that. So you've got money, sex, you also have power. And I'll tell you that the great temptation of leaders that have had some success is they get obsessed with power. Leadership and influence always comes with power. And the abuse of power is devastating. And many of you have probably experienced a scenario. Maybe you've been a part of a church, or you've been a part of a business where there was an abuse of power. And abuse of power is hurtful. And sometimes it's really hard, especially when it's a Christian leader, to disconnect that Christian leader from Jesus. So if the Christian leader, due to an abuse of power, really hurts you, it's hard to not see it as Jesus is hurting you. And so a lot of people, they're today bitter with church, and they're upset with their faith because of a leader abused the authority and power and influence they had, and it crushed someone. It's legit. But God has an answer if you are somebody that struggles with an abuse of power. And Jesus was a stellar example. What did he say? He said, do you not think that at any moment I couldn't appeal to my Father and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? So Jesus is basically saying, I'm allowing all these things to happen, and don't you dare think that I couldn't stop it at any moment. He said, but it's not God's will, and I want to do God's will, and I'm not going to abuse my power and abuse my influence. I'm going to do the things that I need to do. You see, leaders realize they have the authority and they have the power, but a leader with integrity will oftentimes choose not to use it. You see, leaders who always use their power turn into tyrants. And how do you and I feel about a tyrant? We're not really fond of people that lead that way. Finally, what causes people to lose their integrity is pride. Bible's clear that pride comes before a fall, and pride is the frequent result of someone who has success. That if you're successful at business, if you're successful at your job, if you're successful as a mom or dad, if you're successful in leading a ministry, the devil will try to place pride in your heart. When you use words like, look what I've done, instead of, look what Jesus has done. When you say things like, I did this, instead of, we did this, you need to get concerned. Because that means you're starting to believe your own press clippings. And you want to make sure that you do everything you can to constantly crucify the pride in your life. What is pride? Pride is thinking more highly of yourself than you ought to think. Pride can also be as simple as, I refuse to listen. I got it all figured. I don't listen. Pride can also be, if I don't get my way, I'm out of here. People don't do what I want, I'm done. All of those things are the manifestation of pride. But you and I want to be people that constantly are in a posture and position of humility. And God has a really clear answer for that. In Philippians 2:3, Paul said that you and I are to do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than ourselves. You should daily look for opportunities to deny yourself. Daily look for opportunities to deflect praise, give credit to other people, lavish love upon other people, be thankful to other people. One of the reasons why 2019 our theme is #JesusWins is because when we remodel bathrooms and we build buildings and we grow these churches, it's going to be really easy for people to think, we're a great church with great leaders and this and that. And in the end, I want it to be, we have a great Jesus. Like, we are smart enough to know ahead of time that before we even have these victories, Jesus gets all the credit. I mean, he is the hero of the story. And if you constantly view Christian ministry and life as Jesus is the hero, pride will not be an issue for you. But how do we maintain our integrity in the end? And that's really the punchline. And I'll tell you, it's really simple. You maintain integrity by accountability. Now, how do you get accountability? You have accountability to God. You constantly humble yourself before Jesus. You have accountability to yourself. You do not lie to yourself. I mean, self-deceit is honestly the greatest deception. There's many people, they just live lies and they lie to themselves. You need to be honest with yourself in your challenges. You need accountability with a few people around you that you can be brutally honest with and will tell you the truth. And then finally, I think you need to be involved in a church heavy. You need to be involved in a church where you're constantly surrounded by people that love you enough to help you with your marriage, that will coach you with your finances, that will ask you why you've missed church or why you look down, that you constantly have people that are helping you. But in the end, I just want to echo what Paul said to Timothy, that our goal is to start young and never quit. In church, you were born to live a life of integrity.